So you want to get better at Dominion. Or maybe you just want to make sure you don't put yourself in a position like this. It makes sense. Dominion is the one thing that I think sets For Honor aside from other fighting games. That and of course the other 4v4 PvP game modes that no one really plays, but we're not going to get into that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over a few of the micro and macro aspects of this game mode that I think everybody should know. Micro meaning the fighting, including ganking, like when not to and when to gank, stuff like that. Macro, that means your rotations and the maps and stuff like that. So we'll be going over a plethora of things in this video. I'm sure even the most veteran of players will find something that they have learned from this video. I myself learned something while making this video, so without further ado, let's get right to it. So Dominion is For Honor's 4v4 PvP game mode. The objective of the game mode is to get to 1,000 points by capturing the objectives or killing minions before the other team can do the same thing. All right, let's talk some quick numbers. So it's 1,000 points, as I said, to win. It's a 100-point swing for each zone taken. So if you take a point, you get 100 points, as you see here. And if you lose a point, you lose 100 points. That being said, the capture speed is 4.5 seconds, regardless of the number of people in the points. The point generated when boosting is 1.5 points per second. That's also 1.5 points per second for controlling the mid lane. The UI in this case will always show 2, just because that's how For Honor UI is. It can't show 0.5s. For controlling a zone with no boost, you will be getting 0.9 points per second. This is important to remember later, as we will be discussing some important macro play when it comes to rotations that has to do with these numbers. So this means mid lane is the most important lane, as we all know. But also that actually means defending a zone is less beneficial, making it more beneficial sometimes to benefit a point if mid lane is free and then go capture mid lane instead of defending that point. This also means that capturing the enemy zone, also known as backcapping, is extremely beneficial since they will get no points during that time. They get no points for simply defending a zone like they used to, nor do they get renown, which we will get into later. But first, let's talk a little bit more about mid. And I don't mean your mixtape or the joke I just made.
Is this nigga serious?
I mean mid lane. Okay, so there are a few things to consider when it comes to going for mid. Of course, the character you are and how many they have sent, as well as how many friends you have coming, all come into play here. But one thing's for sure, it cannot be overstated how important the minion lane is. Though with the point system as it is today, it could be just as beneficial to stop the boosting of an opponent's zone. This of course will be situational based off many factors and can honestly just come down to experience. Now once you've made your decision to come to mid lane, there are some things you will need to know. First of all, you can kill your own minions. This gives the other team points. It is harder to kill your own minions, but feats like Caltrops will absolutely destroy your own minions, whereas other feats like Fire Flask don't do as much damage to them. You do not gain points for your minions killing other minions, same as in Breach. Only when you kill other minions will you gain points. Also, killing your own minions will give the other team points. Now, when it comes to how many minions can be on the map, it is map dependent, and it also depends on a few other things, like who's holding the lane, who's losing the match, and a few other factors. This can all be confusing for really no reason, but the only important thing you really need to know about minion spawns is that if you are boosting a zone, that will boost the amount of minions that the enemy team will spawn. Now obviously this can be a good thing if you have someone in mid who's killing the minions. You're basically getting yourself more renown, which again we will talk about later, and denying the enemy team that zone. However, if you do not have anyone at mid, you are not only giving the other team a free zone, but you are only getting 0.9 points per second more than that other team. And that obviously isn't the best thing. All the while not contributing to the micro level ganking or team fighting. Basically what I'm saying here is think before you sit there boosting a zone the whole match. Now that I got that out of my system, let's talk about some quick tips for clearing minions. Obviously certain characters are better at this than others. This used to be something that you would want a Vanguard doing because they would get more renown for it. But with most characters and rework characters now having wide arching moves, there are just more characters that can do this quite well. And unfortunately, I can't go over all of them, and it would be a boring ass video if I did, but with any of them, it's important to know that, or important to note rather, that the side minions can hold the lane pretty much by themselves for some reason. These little fuckers are very persistent, and sometimes just taking them out can lead to taking the entire zone. They're extremely important for anchoring, I guess. I'm not sure. Also, certain feats like Battle Cry and any feat that boosts nearby damage or lowers nearby defense is extremely good when it comes to fighting in the mid lane. Also, body count is nice and can be used with unlocked zones to gain a decent amount of health, whilst having decent offense. Gosh, that's hard to say. Obviously, Fire Flash are arguably the best feat in the game for minion clearing. And anyone who tells you otherwise is probably a Viking man. But I hear what you're asking me. Why clear minions to begin with? Well, I mean, points are an obvious reason, right? To gain the mid lane. That's like an obvious reason. But another reason is, as I said, we talked about earlier, renown. So renown is a point system used to unlock feats. Feats are perks that can basically be unlocked during the battle, giving you a distinct edge. Examples would be the aforementioned Fire Flask, Battle Cry, and Shigoki's useless first feat that gives him unlimited sprint when he's out of wind. I mean, really? Anyways, let's talk numbers again real quick. So it takes 50 renown for feat 1. With feat 2, it'll take 120. Feat 3, it'll be 210. And your final feat, feat 4, will unlock at about 335. Well, at exactly 335. Now, the online article For Honor will have you thinking that these numbers are all different for one, which they're not. And also, well, because I tested them, as I'll show you here on the screen. But also, it'll have you thinking that heavies and assassins get different renown for different things. But this is not the case. This was actually changed about 3 years ago, coincidentally, pretty much around the time that article was published. I don't know if it was published before or after, but yeah. So when it comes to gaining renown, so the biggest amount that you can gain when it comes to renown is 20. This is given for a revive and a kill. Capturing a point will give you 10 plus 1 renown per second, with the exception of the minion lane. Mid or the minion lane only gives you points for minions you kill, as mentioned before. So there's no real way to boost mid lane other than basically just killing the minions that are already there. That being said, with one person boosting a point and a player in the mid lane, the player in the mid lane can get their feats exceptionally fast, of course, depending on the moveset of the character at mid, which is just another reason why mid can be extremely important. So let's talk about feats a little bit more. Though they're not unique to this game mode, they seem to be quote-unquote balanced towards it. I definitely use balance lightly, as feats are one of the things that the devs seem to touch least often. I'm not sure if this knowledge was lost to them. They have lost a few other types or knowledges. I don't even know how to say that word. They've lost how to do a few other things with the leaving of the other people, basically. So this definitely could be one of those cases, but they have balanced and tweaked other perks, such as second wind, so I don't see how they wouldn't be able to balance or tweak these. Anyways, I digress. Because of the fact that they usually don't change these feats, you will see feats like Fire Flask and Caltrops that pretty much everyone complains about. Caltrops, of course, less so because they were on a hero that was deemed as weak. So, you know, everyone's like, you kind of need something, but it's really not these heroes' faults. Like when you look at the alternative of these feats, it's basically they have nothing else that they can do. Anyways, when picking feats, it's usually best to pick at least one healing feat, with second wind being arguably the best feat of the healing feats, and then Stalwart Banner being a very close second depending on who you ask. I would say go for one of those if you have them available. Fear itself and the Doom Banner are good for group fights. Berserker being one of, if not the only character that has them both, correct me if I'm wrong, whereas other personal feats like Ocelotl's Trapper's Reach is good for taking down individuals. A feat like Nail Bomb causes great damage and bleed, but is completely negated by healing feats like Second Wind. These are all things you want to consider when picking your feats. Unfortunately, there's no way to know what your opponent's feats are when picking yours, so usually just a general all-around setup is the best way to go. Alright, so say if you don't go to mid lane, where should you go? The answer is usually wherever your teammates are, which should be the zone that rotates to mid most easily. This zone is usually C, but obviously not always. It's again whichever zone is easiest to rotate to mid. So let's say you get to that zone and you find yourself in a team fight or a ganking situation. Well, this is when you'll need to know what ganking or anti-ganking actually is. So ganking, originally short for gang killing, is trying to kill a player or number of players with a higher number of players on your side, like a bitch. No, but seriously, ganking is an important skill to have in any multiplayer PvP game. When it comes to ganking in For Honor, one single most important thing to think about is usually if you're ganking someone, especially if it's taking you a long time, you're leaving one of your teammates to be ganked as well. So while it's fun to play with friends, there's no need to be hanging from their ballsack the entire match, okay? As for those in a solo queue, you'll soon realize it's extremely difficult to gank, as you don't know if your teammate knows the same setups or if they know any setups at all. With that said, there are a few general things that everyone should know and can do together. So because I don't have any friends, I had to use some footage from Freeze. Shoutouts to him, please don't flag me, bro. Okay, so the first thing to note is simply blocking a light. Blocking a light with the normal light is considered a superior block. And after any superior block, you will be in what's called recovery. So any superior block puts you in a recovery state. That is important to know, because being in a recovery state means that you are guard break vulnerable. What does that mean? That means you can get hit with a guard break for free and you cannot counter it. This is one of the reasons, or what partially makes the Varangian guard so good at ganking. The opponent wants to throw out an unparryable attack by locking onto someone else that's far away and throwing the attack near you, a common anti-ganking tool. But she puts on her full guard, which is a superior block stun, and leaves them in a vulnerable state to get guard broken. So what does this mean? This means as the person being ganked, you usually don't want to be throwing out a lot of attacks, as the beginning of a heavy has guard break vulnerability as well. So you could be thinking like, okay, I won't throw out lights, I'll just throw heavies, but that won't work. Another common example is by hit stun. For example, when a teammate gets hit after a heavy, after a guard break, you can get your heavy right after theirs, if you time it correctly, of course. Just note that the hit stun does reset after the second hit, so you can't just kind of chain hits forever. So another hit stun type is a bash. So you can get a bash into the heavy, obviously if the other person has their timing right again. Now you just need to be aware that this will feed the opponent more revenge. Now revenge is like a whole nother aspect of ganking that I actually do describe in great detail in this video here. So if you want to go ahead and check that out. This way you have a good understanding of what I mean when I reference revenge and revenge gain. Now revenge gain is important because it'll teach you when and when not to gank. And I think sometimes when not to gank can be just as, if not more important than when to gank. Throwing an attack at the improper time could mean the difference between getting a kill and a revenge pop, which can be detrimental to your team. Now all this said, it's obviously the job of the anti-ganker to take all of these things into account and only attack when it is most safe to do so, or really not at all. I mean, it is your job to stall after all until someone comes.
Pause!
It is not necessarily your job to take on that 2v1. For reasons previously mentioned, it is extremely difficult to kill two people who know what they're doing at the same time. Another universal tip for the anti-ganker is to never guard break. If another person does not counter your guard break, you will be sitting there for what feels like an eternity with 0 damage reduction. And all of the hits you take will just pretty much be free. Now let's say you find yourself in the position that I am here, the unfortunate position of a triple cap. One might say the obvious route is to wherever your teammates are, like I took here. And sometimes that is the obvious route. But maybe your teammates are absolute nincompoops and they are trying to remove a screw with a hammer by going to one gank site over and over and over to their deaths. Well, in this case, the minion lane is usually your best bet. This is the only lane that can be capped without killing anyone. And if you are losing, you should have more minions than the other team, allowing you to have a slight advantage. Obviously, this does not work if their entire team is there. As said before, this will be partially due to experience and something that you will have to gauge. Also, not letting your pride put you in a terrible situation is usually advisable. Now, For Honor is definitely a game that's mostly known or played for its fighting aspects, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a little bit of tactics to it. And these tactics are good to know in case you ever find yourself against people who are better at the game than you, or at least at the micro level, but you have a better macro knowledge. Now, we definitely went over a lot in this video, but they can be broken down to a few main ideas. 1. Attack in the mid, unless you can't. 2. Gank, unless you shouldn't. And 3. Pay attention to your renown. But all of that said, none of this will make any difference if you don't win your fights. More often than not, winning a fight means going back to the basics. So why don't you click the video on the screen so you can see the last beginner's guide you'll ever need. Other than that, if you liked, leave a like, subscribe, do all the things. This has been Yacht Gaming. We will see you in the next one. Stay safe, be blessed, and I'm out.